Have you ever stopped to wonder how a species capable of deciphering the age of starlight, of calculating the curvature of space-time, and of manipulating the building blocks of matter, still finds itself struggling to understand the one thing closest to home ourselves? We've sent spacecraft beyond the reach of sunlight, we've mapped the structure of DNA, we've created machines that learn from us, and yet we haven't learned how to coexist without conflict. Somehow, in all our computational prowess, in all our cosmic ambition, we remain entangled in age-old struggles. Fear, greed, division. This paradox isn't just poetic irony, it's a diagnostic of consciousness. It's the signal that our intellect has outpaced our wisdom. The universe is old, 14 billion years and counting. In that unfathomable expanse of time, stars have been born, burned, and died, leaving behind heavy elements that now make up your bones, your blood, your breath. You are not simply in the universe, you are of its stardust, organized in such a way that atoms can ask questions, that molecules can form meaning, that neurons can simulate infinity. This isn't mysticism, this is astrophysics. And yet, despite this intimate heritage with the cosmos, we act as though we are separate. We behave as if our existence is incidental and accident of biology rather than a consequence of cosmic evolution. But consider this. You are the first known configuration of matter in the observable universe capable of contemplating the universe itself. That fact alone should reorder our sense of importance to inflate the ego, but to awaken humility. Because out of 100 billion galaxies, each with 100 billion stars, you somehow emerged with not just the capacity to survive, but to wonder. And in that wonder lies the next frontier. Not on Mars, not in a black hole, but in us. The problem we face is not a lack of detail, it's a lack of direction. We've got knowledge without compass, power without philosophy. We know how, but we rarely ask why, or worse, we dismiss the why as irrelevant. But meaning is not an afterthought to science. It is the context in which science becomes humane. Some people speak of a divine planas if meaning must be imported into the universe from somewhere else. But what if meaning is not injected into the cosmos, but emerges from it? What if the planet, if we dare use that word, isn't prescribed, but discovered as consciousness becomes self-aware? Evolution did not stop at opposable thumbs. It did not culminate in agriculture or printing presses or smartphones. Evolution is still happening, but now it is cognitive. Now it is moral. Now it is planetary. We are not at the end of our story. We are at an inflection point. If you plot human history on a cosmic calendar where the Big Bang occurred on January honest and today's December 31st, then all of written history happens in the last few seconds before midnight. That's how new we are. That's how unfinished we are. So perhaps it should not surprise us that we still stumble, that we still struggle to live in peace, to protect the biosphere, to resist the gravitational pull of tribalism. But here's the astonishing part. Despite all this, we are learning slowly, imperfectly, but undeniably. Because knowledge, like entropy, wants to spread. Awareness, like light, wants to expand. And as more of us tune in to the interconnectedness of all things, not through fantasy, but through evidence, we begin to reframe our role in this vast experiment. You don't need a prophet to tell you that the old systems are breaking. You can see it in the melting glaciers, in the polarized discourse, in the exhaustion behind every productivity metric. But collapse, in the language of the universe, is not failure, it's transformation. Stars collapse before they shine anew. Forests burn so that ecosystems can reset. In cosmic terms, breakdown precedes breakthrough. So what does that mean for us? It means we stop waiting for saviors and start participating in solutions. Not grandiose revolutions, but daily, grounded decisions, anchored in coherence between what we know and how we live. That shift small in action, seismic in implicationes, where evolution happens now, because consciousness is no longer a personal trait. It's a civilizational threshold. And we are crossing it not all at once, and not without resistance, but irreversibly. Some will resist, of course. Systems built on inertia often do. But entropy is patient. Evolution doesn't ask for permission, it just continues. And right now, it is asking you, will you participate? Will you remain a spectator in the cosmic drama? Or will you step onto the stage as an agent of coherence? Not to control the script, but to write your verse. Not to dictate the future, but to contribute to its unfolding. Because here's the truth, the universe isn't asking you to save it, it's asking you to understand it. And through that understanding, to align your actions with its principles. Principles like balance, like interdependence, like complexity arising from simplicity. These are not religious dogmas. They are physical realities. They are the scaffolding upon which galaxies form, ecosystems thrive, and civilizations survive. So if you feel the ground shifting beneath you, don't panic. That's not the end. That's the beginning of awareness recalibrating to its rightful scale. That's the sound of humanity realizing that it is not the center of the universe, but part of its continuous unfolding. In that realization, there is power, not the power of dominance, but the power of perspective. And perspective, my friend, is the birthplace of wisdom. So let's set aside just for a moment the distractions of our day-to-day stock market, social media, geopolitical tension, and ask a question both ancient and profoundly modern. What does it mean to be human in a universe like this? Because if we are merely statistical anomalies, carbon scaffolding animated by chemical coincidence, then nothing ultimately matters. But if we are the product of cosmic evolution, of 14 billion years of increasingly complex order rising out of disorder, then everything matters. Every decision, every conversation, every thought. Why? Because in this strange, brief moment we call human life, we are the only known species with the capacity to choose how we evolve. Not through natural selection alone, but through conscious participation, through empathy, through ethics, through the astonishing act of self-awareness. And that self-awareness is not just an internal mirror, it is a signal back to the universe that its laws have not only produced galaxies, but gratitude. Not only black holes, but beauty. Not only entropy, but ethics. What more noble legacy could matter bear? But we've reached a juncture technologically empowered, yet spiritually uncentered, where the survival of our species no longer depends on fire or flight, but on psychological maturity, emotional regulation, the ability to transcend tribal impulse in favor of planetary stewardship. This, perhaps more than anything, is the defining challenge of our era. Not whether we can reach Mars, but whether we can reach each other. Not whether artificial intelligence will surpass us, but whether our natural intelligence will elevate us. Because power without purpose is peril. Technology without temperament is tragedy waiting to happen. You see, the universe does not operate according to human preference. It is cold, vast, and indifferent. But that does not mean we must be. Our consciousness does not contradict the cosmos, it completes it. The same gravity that shapes galaxies also draws tears down a human face. The same electromagnetism that powers our devices also sparks the synapses that feel joy, that know love, that ask why. And in that unity between physics and feeling lies a truth grander than any myth we've inherited. That meaning does not require miracles, it is the miracle. To live in alignment with that scientifically informed, ethically attuned, cosmically humble, that is not religion, that is not ideology, that is awareness. And awareness, like any force, needs cultivation. It needs quiet. It needs inquiry. It needs the courage to look beyond what is profitable to what is principled. Because civilizations do not fall from a lack of engineers. They fall when coherence erodes, when values are outsourced, when distraction replaces reflection, when knowledge becomes more abundant than wisdom. But here's the elegant twist of the universe. Just as chaos precedes structure, awareness always reemerges from collapse. We've seen this before culturally, biologically, geologically, and we are seeing it again now. Our institutions are strained, our climate is destabilizing, our attention is monetized, but even here, especially here, there is hope. Because disruption, when met with vision, becomes reformation. And that vision does not have to be vast. It does not require global platforms or legislative power. It begins with the physics of personal presence, your ability to remain curious in a world trained to react, your willingness to replace outrage with observation, your refusal to confuse noise with truth. In this way, the smallest act becomes seismic. The mere act of pausing, of choosing to redirect your attention from fear toward understanding, is itself an act of cosmic alignment, because what you pay attention to amplifies. And in a universe governed by feedback loops, amplification is evolution. So if you're asking, what can I possibly do amid all this complexity? Consider this: your choices ripple, not metaphorically, literally. Neuroscience tells us that human behavior is contagious. Kindness propagates. Empathy scales. Even brief interactions alter neural pathways, not just in you, but in those you encounter. You are not an isolated node. You are a transmitter in a network that stretches across time and species. Every time you choose to understand instead of dismiss, to inquire instead of judge, to connect rather than conquer, you are participating in the thermodynamics of awareness. You are shifting entropy into structure, chaos into coherence. This is not poetry. This is physics. Low energy systems naturally evolve toward disorder unless energy is applied intentionally. That energy in social systems is consciousness, attention, discernment. So when you choose stillness over distraction or nuance over narrative, you're injecting order into the informational field of civilization. You are being a counterforce to entropy, with might but with meaning. That is how galaxies form. That is how minds awaken. And that perhaps is what it means to evolve not to transcend nature, but to align more deeply with its most elegant patterns. Patterns of emergence, of complexity rising from simplicity, of cooperation outlasting competition. Because long after empires have crumbled, what survives are ecosystems, systems that recognize mutual dependence, systems that adapt, that integrate, that regenerate. Which begs the question, will we build a civilization that mirrors empires or ecosystems? One extracts, the other exchanges, one exhausts, the other renews, one fears collapse, the other transforms through it. And transformation, like any natural phenomenon, requires catalysts, not saviors, not heroes, but pressure points individuals who embody the next evolutionary iteration before it becomes mainstream. Individuals who act from future-aligned values in a present, still clinging to outdated software. Maybe that's you. Maybe the reason you feel restless, like something doesn't quite fit, isn't dysfunction, but calibration. You're sensing the mismatch between inner awareness and outer systems, between what is and what could be. And that feeling, it's not a flaw. It's the edge of emergence, the very frontier where progress begins. Remember, the most significant revolutions in science and in society didn't begin with certainty. They began with questions, with discomfort, with anomalies that refuse to be ignored. In that sense, your discomfort is data, not a problem to numb, but a signal to decode. So decode it. Ask, what kind of future would physics permit, biology sustain, and consciousness inspire? Not a utopia, but a trajectory, not perfection, but alignment, a future where our tools reflect our values, where our systems honor not just efficiency, but empathy, where science and society are not adversaries, but collaborators. That is not naive, that is necessary. Because the alternative, the default path of unchecked acceleration without introspection, leads not to progress, but to collapse. And history is replete with civilizations that fail to recognize that intelligence, divorced from wisdom, is not enlightenment, it is entropy in disguise. So here we are, a civilization with the capacity to model climate systems, decode genomes, and simulate the early moments of the universe, yet still wrestling with how to treat each other decently on a crowded street. We have godlike technology, but Paleolithic emotions. We have algorithms that predict your next purchase, but still can't predict how to build consensus across difference. That's not just an irony. That's a design flaw in our evolutionary software. We now have the tools and the responsibility to debug, because the most urgent frontier is not outer space, it's inner space, not rockets, but reasoning, not escape velocity, but emotional maturity. And that means rethinking what we even mean by progress. For too long, we've mistaken acceleration for evolution. We've assumed that more data, more consumption, more speed equates to more advancement. But in physics, unchecked acceleration without vector alignment leads not to progress, but to instability. And in societies, the same. So we must pause not to retreat, but to recalibrate, to ask whether the trajectory we're on honors the nature that bore us, the science that informs us, and the consciousness that connects us. You don't need a telescope to see the stakes. You just need to look around. Mental health crises, ecological degradation, political fragmentation, all symptoms, not of failure, but of misalignment between what we've built and what we truly value. And here's where it becomes deeply personal. You are not separate from this trajectory. You are a variable in the equation. Your thoughts, your conversations, your courage to ask better questions, these don't merely reflect society, they shape it. When you choose reflection over reaction, when you embrace curiosity over cynicism, you are quite literally acting as a correction vector in the collective momentum of humanity. That's not hyperbole. That's systems theory. And systems change not by massive force, but by key leverage points places where small, well-aligned inputs create cascading effects. Often, those inputs come not from institutions, but from individuals, from people like you, whose inner alignment ripples outward. So perhaps we stop asking, when will the world change? And start asking, what part of the world am I already changing by how I live, think, speak, and choose? Because history is not made by the loudest. It is made by the most coherent. And coherence begins when you align your understanding of the cosmos with your conduct in the world. So no, you don't need to be famous. You don't need to have a platform. You don't need to have all the answers. But you do need to remain available to the question, to the wonder, to the ongoing experiment that is being human in a universe that is not finished with us. Because the universe is not static, it's dynamic. And you are not a spectator, you are an active participant in its unfolding. You are a filament of awareness woven into a cosmos that has produced both quarks and questions, both black holes and Bach, both thermodynamics and tenderness. And your capacity to bridge those, to integrate science with wisdom, matter with meaning, is not a luxury. It is the very frontier of civilization. So what now? Well, that depends on how you define you. If you are merely a bundle of impulses, a passive node in a feedback loop of consumption and distraction, then there's nothing to do but drift. But if you are, as science increasingly suggests, a self-organizing system capable of feedback, adaptation, reflection, then your life is not a reaction, it is a function, a parameter, a conscious contributor to the field of possibility. And in a universe governed by emergence, possibility is the raw material of progress. That means every conversation you have, every question you ask, every silent moment of integrity adds something measurable to the informational architecture of the world, adds order, adds clarity, adds signal in the noise, because the universe doesn't just expand in space, it evolves in complexity. And consciousness, yours, mine, ours, one of its most astonishing tools for doing so. That is why it matters that you show up not as perfect, not as enlightened, but as honest. Honest about what you know, about what you wonder, about what you are still learning to see. Because the most powerful force in the known universe is not gravity, it's not light, it's not even time. It's alignment. When a system aligns, when its components resonate in coherence, it becomes capable of emergent phenomena of properties that could not have existed in isolation. And when human beings align, when thought, feeling, and action cohere, begin to produce a different kind of society, one that does not merely survive its technologies, but deserves them. And that, perhaps, is the future worth aiming for. A civilization that remembers it is not outside nature, but part of it. Not separate from the cosmos, but an expression of it. A civilization that no longer confuses intelligence with wisdom, speed with significance, growth with meaning. Because when we remember that, we remember who we are, not by creed or culture or nation, but by composition. We are stardust literally made conscious. We are the universe becoming aware of itself and asking not just what is, but what could be. And that question, that sacred, scientific, sobering question, is your inheritance. So don't waste it. Stay curious, stay coherent, and above all, stay willing to participate in the most extraordinary experiment the cosmos has ever conducted, a conscious species learning how to care